Okay, super excited for today's episode. Aaron, great to finally meet you. Today we've got Aaron Quinn, founder and CEO of eHouse, longstanding partner of Malomo that I think even predates my tenure here. And I've never met Aaron, so I'm excited to do this live. Well, not live, but kind of live
Semi-live,
Close enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
with our audience. Aaron, thanks so much for stopping by and hanging out with us for a while.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Cool. We were talking to Kara before the call started. She's in Utah. Are you also in Utah?
I'm not. I'm in Charleston, South Carolina. So
Oh,
like totally different region, climate and all. So yeah, we're originally kind of headquartered here and but team is distributed all over like many others. So
yes. Yeah, we feel that.
yeah.
Charleston is one of my favorite cities in America. I've been like 5 times and all like the food scene there is
Yeah.
I
Yeah, they know how to do food well. I mean, a lot of places do as well, but yeah, it's a good place to eat and just an all around cool place, and kind of an older city. So I think that brings a lot of charm. So
absolutely. Have you always been there or bounced around?
no, we were actually in Boulder, Colorado before Charleston. I was there for quite some time with my wife, and we actually started eHouse in Boulder. And then we've been in Charleston for about 17 years. But I grew up in the Midwest. I'm a Chicago kid. So
Got it. I don't know if you heard us with Kara earlier, but we're in Indianapolis. So
yeah.
just a few hours south. And I was telling her that I was sitting outside before I hopped on the Zoom and I'm sweating through my shirt. So hopefully if we're doing, if we're going live here or we're
if
doing,
we're yeah,
then
I think if we're comparing humidity, we
Yeah, I
might
know.
have you beat here. Yeah,
just a little bit. Yeah.
it's intense. It's intense. I just got back from Costa Rica and like jungle land and all this kind of stuff, and I came back and I was like, it's literally about the same humidity as it is walking out my door. So there's
Yeah.
not much different. So yeah, but it's good. Everybody always says you get used to it. I think you just get used to sweating.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Yeah. The first time I went to Charleston, I was like just shocked by how much I was just losing bodily fluids.
It's the good news. I always say the good news is everybody else is doing it too. So it's not like there's like a secret that you're the only person that is sweating. So I think you just kind of learn to go with it. Like I think it's like anything else. The more you fight it, the worse it gets. So no matter how hard you like mentally don't sweat, don't get hot, it doesn't work. So
Yes. Yeah, that makes me feel a little better. Thanks for saying that, man.
I've never been to Charleston, and I don't know if this is convincing me to go, but I've heard great things.
It's one of those places that like 2 months out of the year it's hot and it's humid, which I like, to be honest with you. So and then the rest of the year it's great. We don't have snow, we don't really have winter, so it's definitely a good place to check out.
Yes.
Okay.
Highly
Now you convinced me.
There you go. Exactly. Doing my thing for tourism.
Let's stay on the personal side real quick before we get job talk. We like to start our episodes with one or two things that our guests are excited about in their personal lives.
Ooh, I'm kind of I feel blessed. I have a great family. So that's one. I've got two cool teenagers, which are great. My wife is wonderful. My family is great. So certainly that's, kind of a big one for me. I think another one that's been like a big learning experience, I guess, has been, so I'm like a big surfer. So that's a big part of my life, but wanted to try something new. And my son and I have really been, we've talked about doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu together with zero experience in anything like that. So last September, we both went, and it's not maybe me in terms of like going to someplace I don't know, people that I don't know, and doing something that I have no experience, like just being that complete newbie, is kind of terrifying for me. But it was great. It's been awesome. We love it now. We're like super passionate and super into it, and we go multiple times a week. And it's just been, yeah, it's been a really cool experience, especially as I've gotten, I'm older, and so having that experience of like learning something new for the first time and being that kind of new person, there's actually a lot of enjoyment in that and remembering that, and then obviously spending time with him. And then I think there's just a lot that I've learned in terms of like what I'm learning there and like how it's applicable in my life or my business. Things like being humble. I mean, as a white belt, you're basically in survival mode for a few years. So like you're going into it going like, everybody's better than me. They're all going to beat me up. This is going to be a rough hour and a half, but I'm good with it, and being humble to that. I think knowing that there's no shortcuts, that's a hard one. I'm a pretty like, I want to get better. I want to get better. I want to get better type of person, but knowing that it's just about like putting in the time, putting in the effort, what maybe what like my son's experience is and my experience, like we have different, minds and bodies and all that kind of stuff. So we're not going to be the same. Asking for advice, asking for help is another thing. I think it's really kind of inspired me, like not to be afraid to say, hey, can you help me? Because people are really cool about that. And then I think the last one is really just like slowing down, breathing, saving energy, putting your energy into the right thing and the right opportunity, not all the time. It's something that, literally, others would get after me of like, you're trying too hard for like 5 minutes. You're at like 100% when you got to be at like 100% a little bit at a time at the right moment. And a lot of that stuff, you kind of like hear it, and then you come out of the class and you're just like, holy cow, this stuff's so applicable in life or work or dealing with the team or a difficult situation at work or things like that. So that's been really cool.
That is awesome. Also, I think you might have just answered the last question when we bring it back to the personal side, but I'm not going to spoil that.
Yeah.
That is incredible. So I'm not really familiar with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Is it like, are you like hand-to-hand combat? Like when you say you're getting beat up, like what?
It's
what that
yeah. So it's basically like self-defense. It's a lot of like groundwork. So I would say it's kind of somewhat similar to wrestling in some capacity. You obviously wear like a gi, so a traditional kind of martial arts, clothing, and it's about self-defense. It's about being in control. It's really great. So for anybody who's interested in, it's the hardest workout I've ever done in my life, and I'm a really kind of workout fanatic. It's exhausting, and it's just great to keep people safe, give you like good skills in terms of that. It's a unique martial arts in that a lot of martial arts you can't practice on each other. It's not something you can do because obviously you're going to hurt somebody. But BJJ, like, most of the class, I would say, you're learning stuff in the class. It's kind of like chess too, in terms of like lots of moves. Somebody does this, you got to do this. Somebody does that, slightly change it here. So it's like mental too. But then, 30 minutes of the class, you're literally actively sparring with people in 5-minute rounds. So it's just a lot of like on the court experience. So that's where you've got a lot of like, police officers, military, Navy SEALs, things like that, focus on that as a sport because of what you're learning and the experience that you get in it. But it's also a great community. Honestly, it couldn't be a more welcoming experience. Like I lucked out that the thing that I tried for the first time, the culture's there to kind of be supportive. so it's all about incorporating people, being welcoming. It's okay to be new. It's okay to teach people. There's kind of a mentor relationship thing going on. So it was like the opportune thing for both my son and I to kind of learn to put ourselves out there to try something new. Maybe that was intimidating, where I'm sure not everything is that way. So it's been great, and just really cool people too. So.
Yeah. I feel like that's like, regardless of what it is, like the people involved in it are at least 50%, if not more.
Yeah,
Doesn't matter
yeah,
if it's a new thing or
yeah,
where you're traveling to or what neighborhood you live in. Like your experience is really defined by who is around you, not necessarily what, I think a lot of times.
yeah. It's raising essentially a man almost, and almost a woman. You think about those things, like what kind of things do you want them to have in their lives, or and what are the maybe some of the lessons that I've learned in mine, and how can they learn them maybe a little bit sooner than I did, to have an impact on their life. So this has been one of them for us for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Also, it's kind of a nice break. Not that there's anything wrong with where other guests have been in their personal lives, but I'm not kidding. Like every single one of them for the last 5 or 10 episodes has said they're a new parent. So we're getting a new perspective here,
I am,
having
yeah,
teenagers in the mix.
I yeah, I definitely have to say, like, sometimes my age hits me a little bit, and I'm like, wow. Everybody's like, yeah, I'm so excited. I've got a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old at home, and I'm like, well, mine are 17 and 14, so close, but no, it's different, for sure, but still kids, but almost not. So.
Yeah, very cool. I'm sure there's jealousy on both sides. Like, I wish my kids were still 2, and they're like, oh my God, I can't wait for mine to be.
Yeah, there's definitely like oh my gosh, what is it like to get sleep? And then you're like, well, there's a period where you don't, and then and then all of a sudden you are, and then they're driving, and then it's all out the door in terms of like sleep, being relaxed, things like that. It's like a whole new world.
Level of worry.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, and then the time then you just look up and you're like, oh my gosh, my kid can drive me around. Like that's wild.
That's crazy.
So
Yes. Cool. Thanks for sharing that. So when
yeah,
when you're not practicing Brazilian jiu-jitsu, you are running an agency.
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
and not taking care of your kids. Tell us a little bit about like your background up until eHouse, and then I'd love to really dive into eHouse and where you guys are at today.
Sure. Well, my background, I can tell you, my background is short, because I really, so eHouse turned 21 this summer. So I've been doing this for quite some time. It's probably my only real job, I guess I could say. I started the company with some friends from Mexico City, that I went to military school with, which is like a whole nother story and ride there. But yeah, we started it, kind of as just a way to work together, and that's when I was in Boulder, and then fast forward halfway through that, less than that really. Started working with Chris, who's my wife and my business partner and our COO. And so, obviously I went to, business school and all that kind of stuff. And we're like many others that, got into the web world of like, all of a sudden, I'm like reading books on how to figure out how to do things and learning bit by bit and by bit, and have kind of done all the roles. I kind of joke, I was a designer, I was a terrible developer, and have learned, especially as you grow an agency, you kind of, I like to say, you kind of learn the role, and then you move to that next role when somebody else comes in and does that role for you, and so you kind of touch a little bit of everything. And And now spend, my days is really the CEO kind of leading the vision and the team and dealing with, clients that are interested in working with us and things like that, and partners and bigger relationship stuff. So, and enjoying it.
Very cool. There's so much to unpack there, and you are the most interesting guy I've ever met.
I know, not even, yeah, I'm super boring. Yeah,
No
no,
way. Grew in Mexico City in military school, and
yeah, I was a handful of a teenager, so I definitely got two kids that were way better than I was. So.
But that is very cool. I feel like, most of the people we have on have not been in the e-com world for as long as you have. I think you do a lot of work in the Shopify agency today, but like, what was the evolution of that? Because 21 years ago,
not the same.
It was not existing.
So we obviously started. I'll see how much I date myself. So we obviously started. When we first started, I mean, we built like CD-ROMs for magazines within Director and Flash and things like that. It was like all wild west in terms of that. My partners at the time had learned Flash and were using it in TV production, and we all needed jobs, so we kind of created one at the time, and we started doing web work, and that kind of evolved over years and doing like a lot of like large content sites and things like that. And then we worked our way into e-commerce, and then worked with kind of billion-dollar retailers on UX and UI and front end development, UI kits, things like that. And then I think it was about 9 years ago, we were approached about this Shopify Plus partner program, and we were just kind of like, we knew we wanted to do something different. I would say we could kind of see the writing on the wall when you're working for the big box retailers, and realizing like, it was like chasing one big project after a next, and you could kind of see things shifting in that D2C focus. So, I would love to say it was like, foresight into what things were going on. It was just kind of like the next opportunity to just go like, I don't know, let's try it. It's better than this. And it just happened to be a really great opportunity. It certainly in the beginning was like, again, just, we were figuring things out every step of the way of like, how do we deal with catalogs that are really big and things like that? And what about this? And what about that? But it's obviously been a really wild ride. I mean, we've been doing it now, I think, for about 9 years. We were one of probably the first group of partner agencies at the time with Plus, and we work with Shopify Plus exclusively. So that's all our work is on that platform. And so it's been great.
So I'm curious, you talked a little bit about it, but like, what were some of the signs that you thought this is the direction? Like, even though they approached you, you had to make a call, right? You were on these legacy e-commerce platforms and ultimately decided we're going to give this new Shopify Plus thing a shot. Like, what was sort of some of the like decisions that went, or the variables, that went into that decision?
I think it really came from like the project engagements and then seeing how things went. Projects back then, we would be doing projects and we'd be working alongside like IBM teams and Oracle teams and Iver's team and all this kind of stuff. And you were just like, okay, great. And we'd be doing design projects and front end development projects that would take 2 years. And, like 40, 60, 50% of the work that we would do would literally hit the cutting room floor, like never make it to production. Right. And you're having conversations where it's like, oh, we're going to be doing this feature, that's on the roadmap for 12 months from now. And you're like seriously, like we can't wait for that. Right. Like doing an upsell or simple things like, a good customer account or loyalty or this or that. You were just like, all this stuff was so complicated. No matter what we could come up with, the idea of actually executing it was so far and away of what was going to be actually live by the time that came. And you're working on projects for years on end, and then getting there. I mean, we'd get to the end of the project and the stuff that was not available now was available. And you're just kind of like, it's an endless long cycle of not being able to get done what you want to get done. So I think that was a big part of it. And we knew something was going to have to change. Like, you can't be that slow and that slow moving, especially where e-commerce was going. And I think there were still those D2C brands that were starting to shake things up, and the newer technology was coming out. It just, the large, billion-dollar retailers, things like that. It's like, no, it's not for us. It's not for us. It's never going to be for us. Which, it's kind of like the, iPod and
Yeah.
CD, like eventually it is, like it's going to get there. It's just how long is it going to take, and how fast are the consumers going to be pushing it in that direction. And can you catch up? So I think that was a big part of it. Again, I think just seeing that, also just from a business standpoint, right? Like, it's pretty scary when, you've got 23 people or something like that with a big part of your revenue coming from this one big client versus lots of clients that you're working with for 3-4 months and then ongoingly, versus that one client that's like 2 years, and you're like, great, this is amazing. And you can see exactly when you're going to be done, right? Like 2 years from now, what next? And so it was just needing to change our business model as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting. This might be a stretch, but it reminds me of the Apple like headset, what you just described, where the market has not really reacted super positively to it, at least as far as what I've seen. And I've heard some arguments that like this project was greenlit years ago. They knew it was going to take years to develop, but when it was greenlit, it made all the sense in the world. The fact that they knew it would take 2 or 3 years to develop didn't. Like, that's where they missed, because they're like, how could you, trying to be a nimble agency that has to stay on the cusp of innovation, greenlit a multi-billion-dollar project that's going to tie up assets for 2 years, and the market might not even be there when it's ready.
Exactly.
And so what you described made me think of that scenario too.
Totally. And there's some visionary aspect of it too, right? There's that art form of also being there right before everybody else gets there, right? Like you can be way too far out in advance, which is also a problem, right? Because people just can't keep up. But the art form, I think, is being there right when it caught up. And again, I definitely, we were blessed to luck into a good situation. But I think the things that we had been seeing opened our eyes, I guess, to the opportunity. I mean, we were down the street from a massive Magento shop and things like that. So sometimes knowing what we're not going to be also was a big part of deciding where we were going to go. You don't always see, well, this is where it's going to be, but you can also see like, well, this is where we feel like we can't go. What then, right? If we don't do this, then what? What's the alternative to not making this decision? And so sometimes you have to look at it in that perspective.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So the big theme that I'm hearing is like Shopify allowed you to be a lot more agile and a lot quicker. Do you think that's still the case? Do you think Shopify is still the platform that gives merchants and their agency partners the like ability to most quickly get their site to market and then iterate on their site over time?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think it's still, when you think about Shopify and Plus, I think the big thing that we still talk to people about ultimately is, I think it's being in control, driving themselves around in their own car. That's a big one that we kind of talk about. Like, nobody wants to have somebody build them a car and then, oh, by the way, I got to drive you around in it. Like, they want to be able to control themselves. I mean, that's the power of like, agencies are great, right? But like, keeping up with, oh, we need to get this live, or we need to do this promotion needs to go this, it's very difficult to keep up with that. And so they need to be able to adapt to that internally. And so I think the big thing is really for brands to be able to control the store on their own. That's key, without that technical, huge, massive technical team behind the scenes. And I think for the technical side, I think it's the ability to kind of shift that focus to, we want branded order tracking pages. Okay, got it. Well, in the old days that, and in different systems, it's like 2 months, we're going to deploy that in 2, 3, 4 months, and we're still having difficulty and it doesn't work quite right. You still hear that stuff all the time. Whereas now it's kind of like, yeah, we can knock that out this sprint. And so that speed is so much different. And it's kind of the plot. It's the whole thing, right? It's not just Shopify as like liquid and dev and APIs. It's the ecosystem. It's the support in and around that. It's the ability to plug X and Y in together and be able to move that forward. So brands have to be less of a technology based kind of focused company and focus more on what the consumer wants, because I think as the technology is accelerated, so is the consumer's needs and wants. They want to move quicker too. What made them happy before and what makes them happy 6 months from now will be vastly different, right? And so to keep up with that pace, they need something that's going to allow them to do that. So that's a big part of, still to this day, that's why we're having conversations. Frankly, those brands that were like nowhere thinking about Shopify now are asking those questions for that exact reason.
Yeah. That's just a great like synopsis of the sort of the agility I think that Shopify gives brands. And I see it too, because I came from the enterprise MarTech space. A lot of like Salesforce Marketing Cloud, what would be considered apps, but at the end of the day, they're like full enterprise solutions that plug into or sit on top of your enterprise ESP. And an implementation is going to take 4 to 6 months on a good day. And to your point, like, while the tech is super valuable, like, you're wasting so much time and resources just getting it stood up. And by the time you do, the use case that you stood up first might be irrelevant or much less relevant. Now you got to start over. So
yeah,
I love the Shopify ecosystem because it's kind of, I call it the wild, wild west. Like, things are just moving so quickly. There's probably pros and cons, but there's definitely a lot less red tape, and people are just like, let's put our heads down and get shit done and move really quickly. Cause that's sort of I think part of the ethos that like Shopify has allowed brands to operate with.
absolutely. Yeah. I think it just comes down to, I mean, especially with COVID, right? Like, you saw a lot of brands that their whole, like, market strategy was like, I kind of talk to people a lot of like surfing brands, the whole market strategy is get into the surf shop, get into this, get into that, get into this. And the idea of actually like engaging with the customer or providing, shipping information, or I didn't get my order, or what is it, like, all of that was like brand new to them. And so I think it's this whole idea of like, okay, now that you really do as a brand have to own the overall customer journey, that's where we need tools and technology to allow us to focus on the customer journey, remove kind of the barriers of like, this system needs to talk to that system, right? Like, why is that the bulk of the conversation, right? Like, why is it about well, we really need, this shipment information to go back into the system, and we're going to spend hours and hours talking about that. But what's actually on the page and the customer's experience is like, yeah, like that's what they see. But we're fighting, how do we make this one talk to that one? It's wasted effort. It's back to kind of what I was talking about. Like, it's not picking the energy for the right opportunity. It's picking it for the wrong thing. And so that's why the customer experience isn't great. And the brand experience is also terrible as well.
Yeah, man, that's a really interesting take. Go ahead, Mariah.
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear your opinion, Aaron, on, because we're talking obviously on the brand side of how like a brand's priorities can shift, but how do you think that's influenced consumer behavior? Because my 2 cents on it is, now the expectation, and we talk about this a lot with Malomo, is the expectation is you're a lot more attached to the brands that you're buying from, because like the Shopify ecosystem and the e-com space has developed in a way that has now become the importance for the brand side. So would you say like that's kind of like both of those things in tandem working together, or with brands not having to focus on like the tech and just being able to plug and play different supporting apps for their Shopify store? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like, through the convenience, there's also just a closer relationship. Like like an example, I bought a cold plunge, right? And it's a Shopify, it's on a brand on Shopify, and it took weeks to get, so it took forever to got it, and something wasn't right. It was leaking water, it was doing this, and like, there's that whole process. Oh God, like like the delivery was a challenge. I'm like, what are we going to do here? What's the customer support going to be like? And this idea of, I go onto the customer support, I call the number, and the first thing they do is it just says like, hey, if you don't want to wait, we'll text you back and we'll have the communication over text, which I had never done before. Because typically, if it doesn't work, I'm like, forget it, just put it in a box and don't worry about it. Because I hate that experience of going back and forth with somebody. And because it's so bad, right? And so just this idea of like, okay, yes, text me back. And then Brad is texting me back going like, hey, can you send me a photo of what you're seeing? Can you try this? Let me send you this real quick. And like, all of a sudden, and it's stuff that like, yeah, it's communication, it's customer support, but it's Brad who's in my, phone messages, and I'm like, hey man, I'm on vacation, let me send you that video when I get back. And he's like, yeah, no problem, no worries. And so all of a sudden, Brad isn't customer support Brad, it's just Brad. And so I have a different relationship. And so here I am, like feeling like I'm getting to know the brand when I'm dealing with an issue. And so I think it's the way that the technology is changing, and the information, and when done right, and it can be done wrong lots of different ways. Like, now the tech allows us to do so wrong so quickly, most definitely. But when done right, I think the relationship that you build with the brand is so much different than like, fill this out, do this. There's a robot on the other side. Nobody knows who you are. They don't really care that, you didn't get it, or you're on vacation, or they're sending you emails when you're on vacation going like, you have 7 days to do your return. Like, nobody's aware of that. So I think that's what's been, I think, really different from what people experience kind of like pre-COVID. And then people really had to figure it out during COVID, because that's the way people shopped. And I think we've learned so much from that now.
Yeah. I love that perspective, and the story to support it too. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Tell us, so that I imagine was not an eHouse client that you bought from.
No.
It's about a cool project that you or your team has worked on lately that you're excited about.
Yeah, I mean, so we're easily stoked, I guess I would say. Is like we every project we launch, I think is really exciting. It's just seeing something come from nothing to something. it just doesn't get old. I've been doing this for a long time and it's still really exciting. And I think it's really exciting. It's really easy to go like, man, it's cool, or man, the results are great. As an agency and as service provider too, I'm sure you guys experience this too, but like also the feedback of like, oh my gosh, this is make my job so much easier. I kind of tell the team oftentimes it's like this idea of like us running into somebody's office, taking all their old computer stuff, which might be junky, might be difficult, leaving them with new stuff, but it's still new stuff. And you still got to set up, you still got to figure it out. But when they come out of it and they're like, this is going to change I don't have to stay up any late anymore and do this. So that's really cool. So I think there's that aspect of it as well that I would just add on that's enjoyable for us. But cool projects. We recently did a headless launch for Briogeo hair, which has been really exciting. Just to be able to see unleash kind of what we need to do and have that PWA experience allow us to really push speed and performance while also still delivering all the content and the features and things like that we want to. Same for branded bills, a headless plus build for them. Really a cool brand that's seeing a lot of growth. And then, kind of vertical leaders like Title Boxing. We just launched a new site for Title Boxing, which is a really cool, really well-known brand in the, true kind of boxing community. What you envision, like, if Rocky went to a gym, they'd have Title Boxing stuff in that gym. So there's that cool aspect, especially as well. So, lots of great results, speed, conversion, AOV, all that kind of good stuff. And I'm sure we'll be posting case studies on that, but really enjoyable projects and clients as well. And so really proud of the team's work there.
Yeah, Briogeo is a long-term client of ours. I don't know if we've done a case study with them, Mariah.
We have done a case study. Yeah, they haven't come on the podcast. I just used their products actually last night, which is awesome. Yeah, but they're great company.
So you probably shopped from the new headless site.
Well, I don't know, actually. I'll go check right now. But
I use their products as well, just because we've got them at the house, but yeah, it's good stuff.
They're a little like bear container too. It gets me every single time. It's adorable branding.
Yeah, it's a great brand. And yeah, it was just an exciting project. It was something that, they were really excited about, kind of the brand transformation, the redesign, things like that they were doing. So that's great. And again, we're really blessed to work with some great clients as well. It's not always about how cool the brand is or what celebrity or this or that. Sometimes it's just great because, so-and-so on the other side is really cool and we're going to have an impact on their job or their company or this or that. That's pretty inspiring as well. So.
Absolutely. Sounds like a couple headless projects recently, and we haven't heard as much of the headless buzz as, maybe a year ago to everything we've talked about. Things move fast. First question, are you doing a lot of those still? And second, what's sort of the preferred platform that eHouse likes to use?
Yeah. I don't think a lot, it's still, a smaller subset of the clients that we work with. I think, I'm a firm believer in like headless isn't right for everybody. I really truly believe that. I think it's excellent for the right people and terrible for the wrong people and the wrong brand. So I certainly don't think it's one size fits all. It's really just that opportunity to deliver that experience, that kind of product and brand value, storytelling and things like that without, some of the limitations that we have to worry about, which isn't like fun stuff like speed and performance and things like that. It changes that perspective. Sure, it's definitely still, I would say, on the cusp of like the new. And so there's lots of learning curves and things like that as you go. But I think once it really comes together, it's fantastic. And I think directionally, it's where, in general, e-commerce is going to need to go, whether it's headless or another solution. I think that speed is a part of that customer experience that's crucial. In terms of, again, we do a lot of, liquid builds. That's predominantly what we do. And then in terms of platforms, so we work with Pack, which is a headless solution. And so they're probably our go-to, primarily just because, again, we're, as I kind of mentioned earlier, it's about, the speed, the performance, the this and that. But a lot of the clients that we deal with too, like their editing experience and, do you have to log in here and log in there and deploy this and deploy that and do this and do that? All that stuff is a lot. So I think Pack's done a really great job of like building a very similar experience in terms of like what it's like to manage a store in Shopify or a theme and things like that, and have it not be that tremendous, I kind of liken it to, it's like, it's still a computer, it's still got a keyboard and a mouse and things like that. You're not like, using voice commands to do everything. It doesn't feel like far out from what they're used to doing. It's really still there. And the focus again is that speed and performance, making it easy for them to use, being able to manage that content has been big. So
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm really happy for Corey and the whole Pack team. Like they've
totally good people.
Yeah, they're great. We kind of, I think we were connected with Corey before the headless like transition from the agency he was running. So it's cool to see it all kind of come full circle and that they're doing well. Okay, I want to move on. It's Retention Chronicles. I got to ask you about retention. So I'm not even sure, and I probably should know like how involved eHouse gets on the like retention marketing side. But regardless of that, even when you're thinking about doing a site rebuild for Briogeo, like how do you think about retention and not just we need to make a pretty site that acquires customers, even on like those very early days of building an experience?
Yeah, and we do. So we do a lot of retention services, and it's something that we're, also focused on throughout the design and kind of that build phase as well. Especially due to the verticals that we work with. We work with a lot of health and wellness. We work with, beauty and cosmetic and apparel brands and things like that. So that is key. It is for, all brands really. But, I think retention for us, I mean, I think the way that we look at it is it's really at its like most simple form. It's, providing that value that customers ultimately want. And when you provide that value, they're willing to continue to come back and give you that business for your company, for your brand, for your product, whatever that may be. And it's really as simple as that. Like, yes, there's lots of stuff that make up, what you could do, how you can do it, where you can do that. But at the end of the day, it really boils down to like value and what they want, what you can give. And if you can give them the right things, then they will stay sticky and continue to shop with you. And I think there's levers that you can pull there in terms of like what has the impact, right? We talk a lot about, the personalized customer experiences. How does customer support fit into that? Loyalty and membership programs, and how are you driving value through those for customers so that they're more engaged with the brand? The user experience, how does it, kind of have that seamless experience no matter where you're shopping or what you're doing, really making sure that that's kind of flowing through and true. Product quality, is part of it. I mean,
that's a good one. We don't ever hear that because I think a lot of people think it's a given. It's not a given.
It's not. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, like, I think a lot of people are like, hey, we're seeing this in our, retention, subscription cancellations and this and that. And what do you think of the data? And, one of the questions I always ask is like, you don't have anything of like, is the product bad? Like, do you know that, you got to be willing to ask the question to know, because it's not always like, well, I have too much or I have too little or, I don't want it anymore. Like, well, why? Is it bad? Do you not like it? Did we not do a good job? Like understanding those things are important. So product quality is a big one. Pricing, is the price what they're willing to pay, right? Is that a good value for them when you combine everything else? And it doesn't mean you need to be price sensitive, but you do need to factor that in. It is a factor, probably more so now with everything going on economically. The communication, the educational content, how are you educating them? Are you keeping them educated? I was just literally like shopping for some more natural deodorant. I'm like, the fact that that's still frigging confusing is like mind blowing, right? Like you're still like, well, does it need baking soda? Does it not? Is it not aluminum? Like, what shouldn't it have? I mean, there's like the pillars of like, yes, don't hurt animals, and I want it to be good, but now it's like natural, all natural, like organic, all kinds of stuff all over the place. So is still about educating the consumer, both pre and post, and then that post-purchase engagement, which is huge for you guys. I mean, we've seen a lot of brands just adopt this idea of like, oh my gosh, like it doesn't stop when they place the order, and like shipping is a thing we need to be involved with, and we can generate a lot of revenue or in and around communications in and around that, as well as customer experience. So that post-purchase experience, and then continually involving, right? Are you asking the right questions? Are you surveying them? Are you digging into the reviews, not just answering their reviews, but getting that information and then continuing to pivot and adjust, because brands are coming out all the time. They're pivoting, they're adjusting, they're making those tweaks and adjustments. You got to continue to do that because people have choices now. That's what we learned in COVID is we got to stay on top of this stuff because they do have choices to pivot.
So many choices. This is like, we're going to have to clip this, Mariah. This is like the most in-depth, what does retention mean to you answer we've gotten.
I love it. Yeah.
That's
So
like
good.
a full
I can be a
thought,
talker.
right?
Yeah, I can be a talker.
That's perfect
So,
for us podcasters.
Yeah,
Long form
yeah.
content. That's the best thing.
I just looked up Riogio's tracking page because I remember them having some sort of educational content on here, and they do. And I think that it's a great mix of like, not only are we highlighting other products that make sense for you based on what you've already purchased and using sort of that retention lever here, but we're also making sure that first and foremost, you're going to get the most out of the product that you just bought, or at a even higher level, like you're going to really understand what sets Briogeo apart overall. And I think that the brands who not only focus on like driving additional revenue in these highly engaged touch points, but also focus on educating both on products and brand are the ones who are really thinking about it the right way, because they're thinking about bringing value to merchant or to customers beyond just what they paid for. And I think that goes a really long way in retaining customers.
absolutely. I think the hardest part is for people to remember it's the time you know the most about the customer. You can kind of guess the most information right then and there, right? Like they didn't purchase this, but gosh, they really should have. Like, I don't think you're going to like this unless you have this, right? Like, or, all those types are, what are they going to need to know? What do they need to know next, right? How do I keep them engaged? Like all of those things are so crucial. And I think, people oftentimes push out that kind of post-purchase engagement way too far because they think, I don't want to bother them. I don't want to do this. It's not bothering if you're driving value. If you're just cramming stuff down their throat, then yeah, don't bother them, right? But if you're truly driving value of like, hey man, we noticed you didn't get this, you should have gotten this, or by the way, like this is how you should use this or this or that, and like don't do this every day, right? You need to do this at this, regimen. That stuff is so key because they did make the purchase and you want them to have a good experience with you. And sometimes that means content. Sometimes that means buy something else. Sometimes that means something,
Sign up
helping
for
them.
the subscription.
Exactly.
Subscription and save money because you're buying these products monthly anyway, but you're not saving because you're not in the program. It's
exactly.
Yeah.
So I think it's moving that conversation up. I think is key.
Yes. Awesome episode. Love it. We both have hard stops, Aaron, so we'll get you out of here. Last question. I hinted at it at the top, and you might have already given the answer. You've had an awesome career so far, and eHouse is still hitting on all cylinders. What's one tip or trick that you feel has helped you on this sort of awesome journey, and that you still sort of look back on as you continue to kill it?
So I a mentor of mine used to say and would remind me a lot, little by little and then all at once. And I use that a lot. And I talk to the team about that when we have, meetings and quarterly meetings, and it's something that I use frequently. And like many others, I am not a patient person. I kind of want to get to the goal. I want to work with this. I want to work with that. I want to do this. I want to be at this point. I want to, whether it's personal or, in work. It's really, I'm very goal centric. I like goals and I like to work towards goals, but that can be a challenging thing too. And so I think that has been something that I've constantly reminded myself in terms of it's great to have goals, but it's really about showing up, putting in the work little by little, working on the small things that add up. And you won't see them it's not like a system, do this, do that, do this, and then it equals this. It really is this, just keep doing the right thing. And then eventually, and sometimes you don't even know it, you kind of look up and you're like, whoa, that happened. How did that happen? And it's just because you show up and you keep doing that work. So I really kind of remind myself to, on the bad days, on the good days, keep doing the work. Don't always worry about X and Y is going to equal Z. Just worry about do X, do X, do X, do X. And eventually that Z is going to kind of come, or a different Z that I didn't even know was going to be there. Kind of focusing on that. I think it's so easy. My dad used to always say, if you go to a big ship and you look out front, it looks like you're going slow. If you go to the back of the ship, you realize you're going way faster and you're churning up all this water. And so perspective is so key. So I just tell people a lot, be patient, put the hard work in, and the right thing will come, and just have faith.
Yeah. That Reid Hoffman always talks about that. Founder of LinkedIn talks about it's window of opportunity. He has some other phrase of it, but he's it's when opportunity and luck sort of meet each other, or preparation and luck meet each other. And it's all about this putting in the work and then finding the right opportunities, to your point earlier, to put all of that energy behind.
Yep.
Think about that a lot too. That's an awesome sort of.
Just do the work. There's no Instagram post, no link that you're going to click that's going to tell you, the way to make it, or be successful. Just do the right stuff and try and do your best. And if you're right 50% of the time, you're in good shape.
Absolutely. Well, Aaron, thanks so much, man. Again,
absolutely.
Really stopping by. This was awesome, action-packed episode. Mariah, thank you. Kara, thank you for coordinating, and we'll see y'all very soon.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.